So we're going to dive into the inner experience of a musical practice that's both effective and fulfilling. And this is essentially what I wish someone had sat me down 20 years ago and outlined all this stuff. That would have saved me really years of grief. And many of us really have a fundamental misunderstanding of what a musical practice is. And this is largely our fault as teachers, and so I take my share of the blame as well. And when we say practice, what usually comes to mind is something like this, where you're sitting in isolation, doing something fairly tedious in order to achieve some kind of future result or goal. But in other domains, a practice is a much broader concept. I mean, when physicians practice medicine, it involves more than just studying for a couple hours a day. Their practice encompasses seeing patients and research and collaboration and constant education. It's a much more holistic practice, same as practicing a religion. It's really part of the fabric of our lives. So as musicians, our practice can be much broader. It can incorporate this solitary practice, the relationship of you and your instrument, but also playing in ensembles, listening, going to shows, learning, teaching. I mean, and for me, doing talks like this is all part of my musical practice. But our culture's idea of practice is similar to homework or a job, which is generally unenjoyable. It's work. It's not supposed to be fun. We have to suck it up and buckle down, and that's how we build skills on our instrument. But it's interesting because we still say that we play music, right? But if we treat music as drudgery, it sort of disconnects us from this playful practice. This is actually my daughter a couple years ago with some of her friends. It's a pretty serious toddler jam session in our living room. So here's you, there singing away, and there's your goal. And the reason it's a goal and not a reality is because we have to push through some various musical, mental, and technical challenges to get there. And today, we're going to call this Crap Mountain. So, what do you think of my Photoshop skills? I put text on the wall. That makes me feel good. Thank you. So, how do we scale Crap Mountain to achieve our goals? So traditionally, teachers tell us we become great musicians through discipline and delaying pleasure in the moment for rewards in the future. So, as this slug is doing, scaling Crap Mountain there. So buckling down and having the willpower to do something unpleasant is an important skill in life. I mean, if I waited until I was inspired to do my taxes, it would never happen. So sometimes you just have to suck it up and do it. But this is a small slice of something that's much larger, and master musicians approach their practice in a fundamentally different way. And as you know, I'm a saxophonist, and I like to tell 3 quick stories of some of the greatest saxophonists to ever live. So we've got here, this is Jerry Bergonzi, who Jeff Chang and I both had the privilege of studying with him at New England Conservatory. And he's just a master musician, master teacher, just one of the greats. And he was interviewed in Downbeat magazine a few months ago, and he said, and I quote, "I love to practice, and I don't practice to get better. That's my secret. I practice because I like practicing." And people say, "Do you do yoga?" And I say, "Yeah, every time I take out my instrument, I get into that zone physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. That's yoga, union. I'm into it." And that's why we all play music. We're addicted to the present tense. So, addicted to the present tense. This sounds like a different experience than sucking it up and doing homework. The great John Coltrane is known as being an obsessive practicer. And in one biography of Coltrane, this journalist, Bob Blumenthal, went to hear Coltrane's 1963 with his famous quartet, Elvin Jones, McCoy Tyner. So when Coltrane was done with his solo, McCoy Tyner started playing. Coltrane just took off and went into the men's room and practiced through the entire piano solo. And then came back out on stage and finished the tune. Next song, same thing. Piano solo, he's gone, just to go play in the bathroom. Then through the set break, just played through the whole break, and the whole set was just, 3-4 hours of just straight playing. So, does this sound like someone who's delaying gratification? It really sounds like he's indulging his impulses, meaning, in Coltrane's case, it took discipline to stop playing his instrument. So let's hear from one of the greatest living saxophonists. This is Chris Potter, talking about a similar thing.
A few weeks ago, you called me and said, "Can I get into the school to practice?" And I said, "Chris Potter, do you need to practice?" And you said, "Yes." Absolutely, and you said, I mean, it was almost like an emphatical, I only want to, but I have to practice. It seemed to me like you're saying, I don't feel right unless I practice. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I mean, some of it is the desire to get better, and some of it is just that, you know, that's such a part of the fabric of my life. That's how I, you know, deal with everything, and that's kind of my way of meditating, my way of, you know, doing something to get my energy right so that I can, you know, give that energy out to people. So it's...
Okay, so there's no question that Potter and Bergonzi put an insane amount of effort into what they're doing. But I want to dive into this inner experience of this practice, because what they describe, you know, hear that, like, I want that. Like, what is this? So is it hard work, or is it meditation, as Chris Potter said, or is it something in between? Like, what is this exactly? So we're going to dive into 3 topics: mastery, drive, and flow, and which can really help you shape this kind of effective and fulfilling practice over a lifetime. And I'll be presenting a lot of ideas here, and so I'm going to post some resources, a recap of some of the stuff on my website. I'll give you, it's already up there already, a link to all the videos we're watching, some of the resources, so you can go dive in later. So we're just scratching the surface on all this stuff. So the first concept is mastery. George Leonard wrote a really inspiring book called Mastery that gives us a picture of the master's journey. So Leonard's discipline is the martial art Aikido, but the lessons in mastery are equally relevant for musicians or in any other domain that you seek to get better at. So fundamentally, mastery is a path and a journey. It's not a destination. So a commitment to this master's journey is about lifelong learning and growth. And our progress toward mastery isn't a straight line from A to B. So as Leonard shows us the path, we experience some bursts of growth, but the majority of our time we're spent on this plateau where we continue to work and practice, even though we might not see day-to-day results. So there's a paradox built into this. On one hand, there is no goal at all. There's no goal. There's no final destination for mastery. You know, we all die before we achieve complete mastery in whatever our domain is. And much of our time is spent on this plateau where we might not be sure where we're going or seeing results. But on the other hand, we strive for goals along the way. We're pushing the edge of our abilities, and we're committed to creating and following through on projects and constantly getting better. So Leonard introduces us. We have to back up. Embrace both the goalless and the goal-oriented elements of this journey. And so George Leonard introduces us to 3 personalities who are not on the master's journey. And what they have in common is that they're not dedicated to this lifelong growth and learning. And you will likely recognize yourself in one or more of these personalities, and I certainly can be all 3 of them. So I'm not being too preachy here about being a master. But the idea is this is really a framework that can help you stay oriented for where you want to go. So first we have the dabbler, who's excited to start a new project, get new gear, show off their new talent, but once the novelty wears off, they kind of lose interest, especially once they hit a plateau, and move on to a new activity and restart the cycle. It's like little kids are dabblers with toys, like the shiny new toys, super exciting, and then it sits in the box with all the other boring toys. So dabbler musicians might accumulate a collection of new instruments that eventually gather dust, and they're bored by repetition and just always seeking novelty. So dabbling can be a wonderful way to explore all kinds of new things, but if you never commit to a domain, you're not on the master's path. So the next personality is the obsessive. So Leonard says the obsessive is a bottom line type person, not one to settle for second best. He or she knows that results are what count, and it doesn't matter how you get them, just so that you get them fast. Obsessives focus entirely on goals without regards for the process. So traditional school and employment can train us to be obsessives. Will this be on the test? That is the slogan of the obsessive. Looking for shortcuts and hacks, constantly comparing themselves to others. You may reach some external success, but oftentimes this obsessive personality will burn out or quit over the long term. And so obsessive musicians are really motivated to practice if there's a pending competition or an audition or a grade, but after solo and ensemble or the audition, whatever happens, they're unlikely to take the instrument out of the case unless there's some kind of pending competitive thing. And so our final personality is the hacker. So the hacker reaches a certain level of proficiency and goes, good enough. And many highly skilled musicians, like professionals, are in this hacker personality. Some have a steady stream of gigs and go, hey, I'm getting gigs, things are cool, I'm just going to coast along. And consequently, they stagnate and don't grow. So hacker musicians rarely practice and don't push themselves out of their comfort zones. So I'm just curious, of these personalities, of folks not on the mastery path, which one do you most relate to? The dabbler, always trying something new? Anyone feel like a dabbler? We've got a few dabblers. How about the obsessive? For a grade, you'll do it? Oh, interesting. Otherwise, okay. And then the hacker, who got to a point and said, hey, things are pretty good. I'm probably most hacker of anything. Okay. It is kind of split. We have mostly obsessives and hackers in here and not too many dabblers. That's always interesting. But it's never too late to choose the path of mastery. I mean, as Leonard tells us, mastery isn't reserved for the super talented or even those who are fortunate enough to have gotten an early start. It's available to anyone who's willing to get on the path and stay on it. So in fact, Leonard, he came to Aikido training much later in life, around middle age. So at any point, you can make this decision to pivot to the path. And this is related to the idea of growth mindset. You've probably heard your teachers talk about. Does that sound familiar? Mm-hmm. Teachers like talking about this. So research from Carol Dweck shows us that our intelligence, athletic ability, and in our case, musical talent, they're not predetermined at birth, like your height or your shoe size. That people that stick to this path end up developing talent, or as I say, talent is a choice, not a musical gift. So if you care enough about something to pursue it, you can go get the talent. It's not just something magical that some of us have and some of us don't. So this master's journey sounds inspiring, but the next question that comes up is really what compels us to stay on the path? Like not for a semester, but for an entire lifetime. For you folks, next 60 years. So to figure this out, we really need to understand what compels us to do anything. Like, why do we do what we do? And Dan Pink wrote a wonderful book called Drive, The Surprising Truth About What Motivates Us. And it's actually a business book, but a lot of it relates very much to education. And he takes decades of motivation research and puts it into something that's really readable. And so he talks about types of human motivations as operating systems, like on your computer or your phone, which is actually a pretty effective analogy. So we're going to start with motivation 1.0. So this is our desire to meet our most basic needs, like getting air, food, water, shelter, and physical safety. And most of you are fortunate enough to have these needs met on a regular basis, especially this week. We've solved the food problem at the campus of Central Washington University. No shortage of food. And so this motivation overrides all others. I mean, if you're starving or drowning or being attacked by this bear, you're not worried about how many subscribers your YouTube channel has. That just takes over everything. So this might not seem relevant to music at all, because we're fortunate enough to live in an era and in a place where we have these needs met. But there is a glitch in this operating system. So, because for our ancestors, being thrown out of a social group was a death sentence. You would get eaten by a predator or starve to death. So we have social and creative fears are wired into the same part of our brain as a physical threat. And so we end up being afraid of things that aren't actually dangerous, as John Harbaugh was talking about on Monday.
I saw a study that said speaking in front of a crowd is considered the #1 fear of the average person. I found that amazing. Number 2 was death. Death is number 2? This means to the average person, if you have to be at a funeral, you would rather be in the casket than doing the eulogy.
It's a good one. So author Stephen Pressfield coined this term called the resistance. The resistance is our biological need to feel safe and comfortable. And this sabotages our art because taking creative risks and performing and sharing music publicly feels scary. I mean, how many of you have ever felt a jolt of fear? Someone goes, hey, play a solo, or you need to talk in front of the class. Have you felt that jolt of fear? Well, that is the resistance, courtesy of Motivation 1.0. So it's possible to manage and ease these fears, but you can't just think your way out of them. If you're afraid of flying, You know, I'm like, well, it's actually more dangerous to, you know, drive a car. Then you hit turbulence. It sets off this part of your brain, this primitive part of our brain that overrides everything else. You know, it's wired into our biology. There are tactics and strategies we can use to ease these fears. So I came up with the idea called the cave of resistance. So this is where we go to hide from discomfort, particularly these kind of social or creative kind of risks. So this may be a familiar place. So we've got some mac and cheese, Netflix. I found this image of peanut butter and cookies flavored Ben & Jerry's. Has anyone actually seen that flavor? Okay. Well, it looks good. I mean, this is enticing for all of us. I mean, right now I could shut this thing down and go crawl into bed and binge watch Netflix and eat ice cream. At any point, any of us can go into this cave of resistance. So here's the question. Why would you choose the challenges of Crap Mountain if you've got the cave of resistance right there? So this is where motivation 2.0 comes in. Rewards and punishment. Money, grades, got a drill sergeant yelling at you. And you know, teachers, parents, and bosses reward the behavior they want and punish undesirable behaviors in order to motivate us and get us to comply. And this takes the form of grades, a paycheck, awards, public shaming, late fees, jail, auditions, and it's quite effective. It's what gets most of us through school and keeps us showing up at our jobs every day, the rewards and the punishment. The problem is, once the rewards and the punishments are out of the picture, we tend to lose all interest in whatever activity it is. I mean, once I finished my requirements for school, I quit like doing math problems. I stopped doing book reports on literature I didn't care about. All this stuff. As soon as the thing's checked off, you are done. And I think this is why so many people quit playing music, because we're so locked into needing this reward and punishment system. And we end up being obsessives, only concerned about the end result and not engaged with the process over the long haul. So the question is, once you graduate, see I photoshopped a graduation cap on that guy, see that? You won't have teachers and parents telling you what to do. You might be in your apartment. So what's going to keep you on the master's journey? Without school and grades, we've got a lot of self-proclaimed obsessive-leaning people in here. What's going to keep you, voluntarily taking on Crap Mountain year after year, rather than hiding in the cave of resistance? And unfortunately, as you progress, I hate to break it to you, the mental challenges of Crap Mountain get even harder than they are now. If you're going out there and doing this. So we've got criticism. When you put your music out in the world, you're opening yourself out for judgment from the audience. And if you do it online with anonymous comments, it's never been easier to be a critic. And the resistance hates this and wants to avoid the vulnerability at all costs. We've got poverty. I want to let you in on a secret. Being a musician isn't a guaranteed way to make a bunch of money. And there are lots of musicians who solve this poverty problem and thrive financially. I'm not trying to talk anyone in or out of a career in music. But it is possible, but it is a challenge to solve the poverty problem if you're doing this professionally. But whether or not you're doing this professionally, we have to deal with our inner critic, perhaps more powerful than the external criticism, that nagging voice in your head that tells you that you suck, or you're not as good as someone else, or you have no talent, or you're never going to get this. You might be familiar with this inner critic, maybe not, but a lot of us, yeah, that's a real thing. You start comparing yourself with other people who are more skilled than you. Risking failure, as John Harbaugh was talking about. Some of you put your things out in the world that don't work. Perfectionism, the vision in your head of what you want to create, and you're falling short. It's like, why would you sign up for any of this if there's no grade? Why keep practicing music when the cave of resistance is only one spoonful away? And any ideas? Because you like it. There we go. You like it. The end. No, I'm just kidding. Okay, what? Yep.
Since you don't get punished if you do get rewarded.
Oh, okay, yeah. More rewards. Anything else? Why would you keep going for it? Well, this is where Dan Pink's Motivation 3.0 comes in. So rather than external motivators like grades, awards, and money, Motivation 3.0 taps into an internal drive. So how many of you, as an example, how many of you ski or snowboard? And how many of you enjoy that activity? Okay, great. So if you're like going up and you found out that morning that it dumped like a foot of powder and you're going up, would you go, oh, I have to practice snowboarding all day? Yeah, no, you hop out of bed and you go. And you know, people that like going snowboarding and go up all the time and hang out with other snowboarders and watch snowboarders who are better than them tend to get really good at snowboarding. And this is kind of the same posture of Coltrane and Potters have about music. It sounds cheesy, everything's kind of a powder day. They pull out their horn and it's that same kind of drive. And you know, that's what this kind of environment is about. This is where some, you know, at this camp, none of you are here to like meet some standard or get a grade. Hopefully you're not forced to be here by your parents. I'm around a lot of people that care about playing music and hanging out with other people who play music and learning, and that's where some of this explosive growth can come from. So Dan Pink tells us that Motivation 3.0 is rooted in 3 areas. So we have autonomy, which is self-directed work, having control over the projects and what you are working on. Mastery, which we covered, constantly getting better at something you care about. And purpose, making a contribution and creating impact with other people. So here's your vocabulary word for the day, Autotelic. Something that is intrinsically rewarding, where the activity is the goal. So it comes from the Greek autos, meaning self, and telos, meaning goal, which I may not be pronouncing that correctly. So we can ask, like, what is the goal of snowboarding? What's that? To have fun. Is the goal to get to the bottom of the mountain? Well, that's where you started, so it's not exactly goal-oriented unless you're, you know, competing in the Olympics. But it's an intrinsically rewarding activity. So now this brings us to an important concept. This is a peak psychological state known as flow, also known as being in the zone, or even like runner's high. There's different ways. Jazz musicians talk about being in the pocket. Flow is a deep state of concentration where we feel our best and perform our best. And you've undoubtedly felt this state at some point or another. So have you ever been so absorbed in some activity, project you were working on? Could have been a video game, it could have been deep in conversation with someone, or a community thing, that hours just flew by like minutes and you may have forgotten to eat or use the bathroom or something. Has anyone ever experienced this, where the time just flies, or perception of time, you're just totally engrossed with it. You have this sort of feeling of kind of your sense of self can kind of melt away. You're just so involved. Okay, so what's an example of what someone was doing to get into this kind of state? Anybody? Yeah.
Well, sometimes it happens to me, like when I'm playing these scales, like I'll just keep working on it and stuff, and then or like long tones and stuff, and then minutes go by faster.
Yeah, that doesn't happen to everybody. That long tones make minutes go by faster. You tapped into the zone. What else? Anything musical or non-musical? Yeah.
Working.
Working? What kind of work?
Construction.
Working construction? Man, if you can find, that's one of these secrets to, you know, for in all domains, you know, happiness, finding that kind of state in your work, like construction. Yeah, it's cool. What else?
Video games.
Video games. The designers know about this. They build high flow as like a measure to just keep you sucked in. It's a powerful force. Yeah?
Playing or fixing instruments.
Playing or fixing instruments. It's so cool to hear some people something that you're doing professionally lighting up the stage. Because that aligning flow with something that pays you money is a really big deal, I think. Okay, in the back?
I have an electrical engineering project.
Yeah.
And I just stayed up until like 5 o'clock without even realizing it. Like I just look out the window and sun out.
Wow. Yeah, okay, let's go more of these. This is great. Yep.
Like in history, imagine like drawing those maps for like religions or something.
Yeah.
And I'd just be like so into like researching all the religions and then writing as much information as I could.
Wow. Awesome. I remember it was college, but for the first time I wrote a paper that I got that into, where I was like excited to find sources, and that was a whole different experience than going, oh, I need 20 more words. Oh, let me add a couple here or there. It's like, I don't know, it's a whole different thing. Okay, yeah, let's just,
Singing, you can get really, really into that. And
yeah.
like
Okay.
sometimes singing lessons will go by and it feels like minutes.
Yeah. Dominic's lessons, right? You're like, whoa, that's over already? Yeah. That's pretty awesome, yeah. Our hour-long lessons feel like 10 minutes. So, okay, yeah, it's just a few more. It's great.
Composing or like arranging stuff.
Composing or arranging. Yeah. All right, a couple more. Yeah. Yeah, Christian?
Hanging out with family or friends.
Hang out with family or friends. The social thing can be huge. I've had that on a retreat or a thing, like, you know, workshops like this. Time goes by. Yep.
Running.
Runner's high. I don't get runner's high. I get runner's nap. So I really enjoy it. Okay, we'll do one more. Yeah.
Having a really deep conversation with someone about like psychology, philosophy, engineering,
Nice. Well, now you can get into flow talking about flow with your psychology friends. Okay. Let's see, getting the right. Oh, I got turned around here. So this term flow was coined in the 1970s by this Hungarian psychologist whose name, anyone want to take a shot at that name? Wasn't expecting that to happen. This would be Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. We can have a training on how to say his name. So in his research on the psychology of happiness, he interviewed master artists, athletes, scientists, and musicians who all became lost in their work. And these top performers describe peak experiences as sort of this effortless stream of their best work flowing out of them or just passing through them. And I was hearing some of that from some of you folks. And this is this optimal state of consciousness where we feel our best and we perform our best. So let's sort of dive into what flow in music feels like. We cover this total absorption, like you're talking about composing. You just lose yourself in a project, whether it's music or otherwise. And might be practicing, learning a new skill that you're really into. And this flow also shows up in performance. So a lot of peak performers talk of this state of non-thinking. Someone was asking me about this, where you're in this state of not even thinking and the music's just flowing out of you. It just sounds like magic. So here's Chris Potter from that same interview describing the same state.
I mean, if I'm thinking about what I'm going to do next, that means I'm not quite there. And when things are really, easy, then yeah, I mean, there's that state where you feel like you're not playing, that this music is happening, and you're almost a spectator of it just as much as the audience is. That it's like this experience that everyone's having, and you don't even feel it's just coming through you maybe, but it's not even. Doesn't belong to you. It's just happening. And that's what I think we all want to get. I mean, it's an amazing feeling when that does happen, and it's impossible to force that to happen. But I think with more and more experience and more attention to the factors that go into that experience, you can help it. You can help it along.
Okay, so flow can also show up in a group setting. So when you talked about deep conversations with people, and musically, you've probably seen a band on stage who's super connected and just in this groove together, and it's a pretty magical experience. And there's been some recent breakthroughs in neuroscience so we can understand what's going on. Charles Lim put jazz musicians and freestyle rappers into an fMRI machine and scanned their brains. And what we've learned is this state it releases a whole host of very pleasurable neurochemicals. You may have heard of dopamine, serotonin, endorphins, oxytocin. It's one of the only states where all these neurochemicals are released at once, which is why it's such an enjoyable state. And scanning their brains, you'd think that someone in this state, the brain's lighting up everywhere. But what happens is some of our most advanced part of our brain in the prefrontal cortex goes offline. There's so much focus going into what we're doing, sense of self, and that inner critic that we all know and love, that goes offline, it's gone. So that is a very a welcome relief to lots of us. Okay, sounds great. We're like, more flow. Sounds great. Sign me up. How do we do it? Because for a lot of us who have found these states, for me it's pretty elusive. It'd just be every several years something would happen and I'd be in the state that just seems magical or mystical. So how do we get there? So the good news is we can design more of these experiences. It's not just random. There's this organization called the Flow Genome Project, and they're compiling all of this research in order to help us achieve more flow in our lives. And personally, this has been a game changer for me, understanding how this works. It's having more of a high flow life has helped me have better practice habits, perform better, write more music, writing books about music. It's been a total game changer. And so we're going to outline, the remaining time, some of these flow triggers, which are preconditions that bring on more flow. So an underlying principle is that flow follows focus. And these triggers drive our attention into the present tense. And so flow only shows up in the now. So here's some of these triggers. One is passion. This is rooted in Motivation 3.0. If you're being forced into an activity you don't care about, you're unlikely to find any flow whatsoever. total concentration. Anyone seen this movie? I say whenever my dog sees a critter, I'm like, that is a level of serious concentration. So you need so if you have 12 browser tabs open and your alerts popping up on your phone, this isn't going to happen. You need some uninterrupted blocks of time to work. And when you're in this state, you're in this zone, you forget you even have a phone, which is pretty nice. So I'm going to move through these again. All these will be posted afterwards, so you can kind of dive in, let them sink in a little bit more. This balance of skills to challenges. Csikszentmihalyi came up with this flow channel. It's this idea to balance the level of challenge with the skills that you have. For instance, if you have a really high skill level at something, but there's no challenge, you're bored. If the challenge is super hard and you don't have the skills to do it, you experience anxiety. So this flow channel that drives your attention into the present tense is like the midpoint between anxiety and boredom. And Csikszentmihalyi suggests finding a challenge that exceeds your skills by about 4%, something that just stretches you, and that helps drive focus. Novelty. Some squirrel underpants. Has anyone been to Archie McPhee's in Seattle? You get into a total focus of crazy, crazy novelty. So we've got complexity. This is tied into feelings of awe. When you stand up looking at the stars or at the ocean, you feel like a little speck in this huge universe. That is something that brings us into the here and now. Unpredictability. Let's see. So, twists and turns keep our attention, whether it's a movie plot or something else. If you wanted to watch a replay of an important football game that you missed, how would it change the experience if someone told you who won and what the final score was? Yeah, then you lose this unpredictability thing. So in this presentation, in the slides, I'm trying to use some degree of novelty and unpredictability to keep you guys paying attention. That's seems to be working. Only a couple people asleep in the food coma, and I'm not offended, but here we go. So mindfulness. So, a mindfulness or meditation practice not only helps us relieve anxiety, it also provides some of this concentration training where we can train our focus exactly where we want it to go. And this doesn't have to be a religious or a spiritual thing. I mean, the science is pretty clear that this type of practice helps us focus our attention, particularly on things that are not novel, that are predictable, that are repetitive when we're on the plateau. Like this guy here, getting into his zone playing long tones. It's this kind of focused practice on something that is not novel and new, which is important for building this foundation of the rituals of practice. Risk is a huge one. So here's a skier at the very top of the Matterhorn in Switzerland. Nope. Okay, so extreme sports athletes perhaps find more flow than anyone else because you have to focus. If you have a lapse in focus, you may be dead. But we don't have to put our lives on the line. As we know, the scary part's coming up. Watch this. Okay. There we go. There was some unpredictability for you. So we don't have to put our lives on the line. Creative and social risks, they're wired into that same part of our brain we talked about, so that can help us drive. Like having a performance coming up tomorrow, that helps us focus. That's one of the that's like, we got this concert tomorrow, guys, we got to do it. That's some of the thing. We've got clear goals and immediate feedback. That especially if you're in skill building mode, you really want to, that you have clear goals and you know if you're hitting the mark. Because if you're practicing archery and suddenly you have a blindfold on, you're not going to be able to focus and refine your skills. So this all shows up in group situations as well. All of those previous flow triggers apply, but in groups we have equal participation. We're in a group, everyone's involved. This is a female percussion band from Brazil called Batala. Shared goals. If you're in a band and half the band's really into the music and the other half is just trying to get the requirement checked off and is disengaged, you're not going to find this group flow. Shared risks. So here's some Navy SEALs parachuting in. So some military folks and sports teams need to make these lightning fast decisions, and tight teams help find this group flow, and some even talk of this consciousness. It feels like your consciousness is merging with the team. And so here's So here's the big idea of this whole presentation. So to craft this kind of practice that we talk about that's both effective and fulfilling, we have to align this master's journey with these intrinsically rewarding experiences. Because if we only experience this slog and the work of Crap Mountain, the process isn't enjoyable and we may burn out or quit. But if we're just seeking flow and novelty, we may become dabblers, not embracing this repetition of the plateau. And this doesn't mean everything's going to be fun. In fact, dealing with some of these challenges are really challenging. But if we maximize this exhilarating work, we find this drive to lean into the hard parts and face these challenges over the long haul. So there's a lot of concepts here. I want to boil this down to 3 things that you can do today, this week. I didn't know what to put on the slide, so I just did a free image search on 3, and hamburgers came up, so I just went with it. 3 things. So here's one. I asked this to the saxophone. Get into your sound. How many of you produce a sound on your instrument that you enjoy listening to? We got some floppy hands. Okay. This may be one of your most important areas, priority, because to be master musicians, it doesn't mean that everything's going to be perfect, but if you get absorbed into your sound, that helps you get into this sort of mindfulness, the ritual part of playing, and it will just help bring on more practicing, more playing. Here is master trumpet player Ingrid Jensen, who I've had the pleasure of recording with a couple times, talking briefly about sound. Yeah, we got a new record coming out in January.
And I really do love to get connected with sound. Sound is just so important. If you're not happy with your sound, then keep digging away at it. You will become happier and happier with it. The more you sing, the more you drone, the more you just get your sound out of the end of your instrument and out of your head into the room.
Okay, skip that one. All right, create this flow timeline, meaning identify all of these, reflect on your past, identify some of these peak experiences that a lot of you were talking about. Like, what were you doing? What did it feel like? Like, what were the conditions? Who was around? Identifying these conditions can help you design more of this into your own life. So, and the final one is indulge curiosity. So curiosity killed the cat. Like, this one's going into the dryer. I think this one survived. But it's not going to kill you. So much great art and innovation comes from a place of curiosity. And if all your time during the week is taken up meeting the demands of other people, you're not going to have the time or mental bandwidth to have these blocks of time to really get into projects that you care about. And so taking ownership of some of your time is huge if you want this to happen. Not booking every minute of the day solid with activities and homework. So here's something I saw on Facebook the other day. I may have been in the Cave of Resistance on Facebook. For sale, legendary sword. Keeps trying to lead me on a noble journey of heroism, and quite frankly, I'd rather stay in bed and do nothing. Back to the Cave of Resistance. So, for more information, email swordguy626. So if you want to take on, this journey, mastery, and flow. Has anyone seen The Matrix? Okay, we got some people. So, finish on this note. So, will you take the red pill and follow this path of mastery, peak experiences, connection, flow, and courage, and making an impact with your art? Or take the blue pill and go in that cave of resistance and just hide and try to feel as comfortable as possible. So it's a choice, and it's entirely up to you. And I'll leave it at that. So thank you for your attention.